Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is McLean Guthrie, and I'm one of the Security Product Marketing Managers here at Verizon. Thanks for joining us for this webinar today, which is one of many we're hosting today and tomorrow as part of our Security Summit series. For the next hour, we're going to be talking about managed detection and response and how security-conscious companies are leveraging people, process, and technology to identify and contain advanced threats. At the end of the presentation, we'll open up the floor for questions and address as many of them as we can as time allows. But for now, let's welcome our presenter. From Verizon, please welcome Scott Carter, Senior Security Product Manager and Product Owner of Managed Detection and Response. Scott, please take it away.
Thank you, McLean. Appreciate the introduction. All right, if I can just pop back to that previous slide. All right, there we go. And welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. For a lot of people, this may have been a conversation that we would have been able to have in person, a few months ago during the MDR launch, but obviously with the global circumstances and health circumstances, we've turned what is a very large Verizon product launched into a mobile launch. So hope everyone is staying healthy and staying safe at home, and very glad that we have platforms like this that we're still able to communicate the exciting new capabilities that Verizon is coming out with. So when we talk about managed detection and response, what are we talking about and what are we trying to solve? And really one of the biggest components and pieces here is the overloaded experience. I'm not going to talk about the security landscape from the perspective of, we know that breaches are going up, we know that the cost is going up. I think everyone here, and especially if you're on this webinar, you probably have already recognized that security is top of mind. That's not changing, but unfortunately, another one of those things that's not changing is this overloaded experience. As it becomes more and more important, organizations are struggling to keep up. Whether it's the vendor load and the number of products out there. If you've been to any security conference lately or past couple of years, walking around those floors can be straight up anxiety inducing. And so, organizations that are already, if you move over to the right here, the talent shortage, organizations that are already struggling to hire and maintain security talent, not only applies to existing security solutions within an organization, but even trying to evaluate and choose what the best solutions are going forward. And part of this comes from a very technology-centric approach that the security products out there have taken. We've got a lot of point products that do certain things or have certain capabilities that they do very well, but in general, the more point products that we bring into an organization, the more this overloaded experience gets worse. And then on top of that, I guess to add to the frustration and the struggles, the constant shift in new business requirements. Businesses today are changing faster than they ever have, whether that's the evolution to the cloud or to new security architectures. And nearly in the future, we'll be talking about the shift to 5G and mobile edge computing. It's constantly changing, and with this security talent shortage, it's getting more and more difficult for organizations to keep up. So when you combine that with the increased importance for security, and certainly falling behind when we compare ourselves to the ever-evolving threat landscape, that's where we really are kind of setting the foundation for where Verizon Managed Detection and Response comes from. So what is Verizon Managed Detection and Response? Verizon Managed Detection and Response is a combination of people, process, and technology. Talking about that struggle on the previous slide, the purpose of Managed Detection and Response is to shift from a technology-centric approach to a solution-based approach, where we can talk with organizations about what is needed to effectively detect attacks on an organization's network and to effectively respond and reduce the time for response to those types of attacks. We're talking about improving security for the business. And the focus with this, obviously, the detection and the initial identification of that compromise, making sure that our analysts have the effective tools and the right technology to be able to investigate, and then also the hooks in and the connections into a customer environment so that we can not only detect and let a customer know about what's going on, but actively work with the customer to make sure that that we're reducing the threat or addressing the risk to the organization. The way that we're doing this is, one, by ensuring that we've got more relevant detection through our threat intelligence, machine learning, advanced analytics. This is a core component and a core focus of Verizon's managed detection and response solution. Another is that we're putting in a customer-specific program that evolves with the threat landscape and the customer's environment to provide continuous monitoring and continuous tuning. And then final one is making sure that we've got a modular approach, that we have different levels of flexibility and different levels of service for organizations that want a lighter touch or organizations that want full touch and full integration into the customer's environment, process, and technology, and making sure that we have those options for an organization to be able to get in at the ground level, but also so that an organization can evolve over time. Organizations are constantly changing, whether they're losing resources, gaining resources, and making sure that we're providing a partnership for organizations that will evolve with their security needs, whether that's as the customer's security operations center is scaling up and Verizon's managed detection and response becomes a little bit more hands-off and lighter touch, or whether the security organization within a customer's environment is scaling down and looking to more outsource, and that's with our partnership, where we're able to take on any slack that's needed from that. So throughout this presentation, we'll be diving into very much the people, process, and technology for Verizon managed detection and response. So how did we get to and how did we develop Verizon MDR as it is today? And part of this comes from a very strong history or long history in managed security services, Verizon being one of the largest managed security services in the world. If you think about traditional managed security service offerings, we try to put a process in place for continuous improvement. And this sort of process, which I'll call the CIRC, Circle of Life, or Critical Incident Response Center, Circle of Life, is kind of a concept that came around a decade ago, and for quite a while was really considered more of an advanced security operations center concept. Right around the time of the release of the kill chain, the cyber kill chain that was coming out of Lockheed, and the types of security operations centers that were in organizations like Raytheon. And this concept was one of continuous improvement for investigation and response, where we have the concept of triage, where we've got some analysts that are picking up incidents off of the queue. They are gathering information and prioritizing those incidents and passing those incidents on to Tier 2 and Tier 3 analysts for investigation and response. Theoretically, the results of this investigation and response feeds into a threat intelligence team or threat intelligence component that is taking the information that we learn and continuing to improve going forward. Obviously, threat intelligence is also pulling threat intel from outside sources and curating that intel. This threat intelligence would feed into our threat content team, and the threat content team, made up of security engineers, is responsible for taking this information and applying it back into the technologies so that the triage or the security operations center continues to get more and more efficient or improved alerts going forward. And even with our own managed security services, we've obviously used a model like this as well, with our 24/7 analysts passing it over to the customer, with our Verizon Threat Response Advisory Center pulling in our threat intelligence and utilizing one of the largest incident response teams in the world, and then our Verizon Threat Content Library, which is a team of very experienced security engineers. One of the most immediate problems with this is that the bulk of this work, or a lot of the effort here, is really being passed off on the customer. Triage oftentimes is done by more junior analysts And as we pass that ticket off to the customer now has to have the expertise to do that deeper level of investigation, which is often more time-consuming and definitely requires a higher level of knowledge. So knowing that this is kind of a historical service and historical managed services, when we took a step back and said what's needed for effective detection and response, we realized very quickly that it's not just technology that's going to enable a more effective solution. We really need to change and rethink our people and process as well. And so that's where we shifted towards a new approach, which is more of a security as a program mindset. And what does that mean? Well, one, there's an immediate shift in resources. One, since we're not talking about just traditional managed security services where we're passing off a ticket after triage, we've shifted towards primarily Tier 2 and Tier 3 analysts that are doing both triage, investigation, and response, owning an incident from start to finish, and making sure that we're providing more experienced analysts here so that not only they're capable of interpreting this data, but also that they're capable of collaborating and working with the customer through that response. And we'll definitely get more into what response means. Another component from a people and process perspective that we've added is our threat hunters. While our threat content team is continuing to develop new detections based on the latest threat landscape, I think everyone today understands that we're never really going to understand and be able to detect everything in advance. So by combining dedicated threat hunters to utilize our technologies and from a global multi-tenant level, be able to analyze the latest threat intelligence, the latest breach reports, and be able to search through our technologies and identify leads or potential incidents for our analysts. Now, one of the things that we were very careful of while developing this threat hunting program is to make sure that this is threat hunting with a purpose. There are a lot of incredible threat hunters out there that can very easily get caught in the weeds and get rat-holed while digging into data. So we wanted to make sure that this was customer value driven and value focused. And so what we do here is we've got a program where each month between our product management, our customer contacts, our threat content teams, and our incident response teams, we have a monthly strategy and planning meeting for threat hunting where we evaluate the latest threat landscape and we determine a new strategy for that month. These threat hunters are responsible for implementing that strategy, whether this be applying fresh intelligence against old data, whether it be using our data warehouses to search for new patterns based on recent breach reports, or whether it be utilizing the UEBA components and the anomaly detection within the solution to look for the latest attacks and try to identify what types of anomalies may an attack like this have created within the environment. If any of you have used anomaly alerts before, every organization is different, and every organization, to be honest, has a lot of anomalies. So we're very careful about the way that we use these, but from a threat hunting perspective, it provides some very interesting capabilities. So those are just a couple of the major shifts as we move from a traditional managed security service into something like managed detection and response. Now, what's another shift that we have to make? Well, if you notice, when I mentioned this kind of legacy model and what we used to be an advanced security operations center model, what we really look at is actually this as more of a legacy model because there's a major component missing, and that is what are we trying to protect, right? What are these analysts, especially for a managed security service, which could be on the other side of the world, could be on the other side of the country. If you're an organization that is partnering with someone from managed security services, how do those analysts understand your users, assets, and applications, right? When I talk about MDR being solution focused, we're really focused on protecting the business, and the users, assets, and applications are at the core of that. So we've evolved this model and added a new process and a new component to this life cycle, and that is the process around technology management and connection to the organization. So for every technology within managed detection and response, we have a process, and this is a continuous process to evaluate the organization, understand the business and the risk, implement the technology, learn from that technology and learn based on how we're doing, and then expand that technology into other areas of the environment, into cloud if the organization is going that way. We're talking about constant mergers and acquisitions even these days. So as a new business unit comes on board, making sure that the technology accurately reflects the organization that we're trying to protect. And it's through this process that we are able to connect our analysts, our threat hunters, the rest of our teams to the business, so that we make sure that when they're responding to an incident, that they're responding with the visibility that they need, with the context that's required to adequately respond or investigate, respond for an organization. Now, it's nice just to say that we have this process, to be able to keep things up to date. But how do we actually implement that? And we implement that through a final resource, which is called our client security engineer. While a lot of managed security services have a primary point of contact, which is more of a soft skill resource that's kind of passing requests, to internal teams and is essentially, handling trouble tickets and the business side. We actually decided to go a different route with Verizon Managed Detection and Response, and we replaced the soft skill person with a client security engineer who is really meant to be a security advisor for the organization. And not only does this resource exist, but we've actually built in dedicated hours on a weekly basis. So we're talking between 5 and 40 hours per week, depending on the size of the organization. Obviously, 40 hours per week is certainly on the much larger scale of organizations, but a minimum of 5 hours per week. Most organizations seeing 10 to 20 hours a week. And this client security engineer is not only the primary point of contact for the customer, but is also responsible for being a security advisor for that customer. So making sure that the technologies are staying healthy, the technologies accurately reflect the latest changes to the environment, that the customers are aware of the latest integrations that we have, so that if we come up with a new integration that pulls in additional context or additional API integrations that allow our analysts to go even deeper into an investigation or perform quarantine or containment actions, not only that the customer is aware of it, but that the client security engineer is actively working with them to configure these new integrations. And I'll get into the technologies behind this in a few moments here, but one of the core technologies is SIM and is log when we still look at what's needed for effective detection and response. So ensuring that log sources are still reporting in a healthy way, making sure that we're collecting the appropriate logs that, for our analysts to be able to perform their investigations. And one of the other components being UEBA and advanced analytics. One of the core components or one of the essential pieces to providing effective advanced analytics is data quality and data health. And so the more we invest here and the more we invest on this connection between the customers we're trying to protect, the technologies, and the people that are monitoring and operating these, the more effective we become and the less hands-off the customer has to be when we talk about what has to be passed over in that collaboration. So this is the people and process, associated with Verizon Managed Detection and Response. And as soon as I figure out a way to combine all people, process, technology into one slide, I will. But in the meantime, I'm going to hop on to the technology and make sure everyone has an understanding of what we're talking about from that perspective. So the technology for Verizon MDR, again, the approach that we took is we took a step back and we said, what's needed for effective detection and response? Everything we've done for MDR has been with that in mind. We wanted to be very, very careful that we weren't slapping an MDR name on a traditional managed security service. And if you think about a typical organization and a typical environment, we've got still to this day, some of that hard outer shell into our DMZ and then into our corporate network. Traditional MSS often at times have focused on that outer shell and focused on kind of the obvious alerts. One of the shifts that we're making with detection and response is that we're wanting to provide this for more mature organizations as well that understand the value of more complete monitoring, understand that we will have compromises, and it's all about how how effectively and efficiently we can detect and respond to those. So making sure that we have internal visibility has been a critical piece of this. As well as making sure that we have the technologies to give us that complete visibility. While I mentioned that logs are still a core component, and we still see SIEM as really the platform for a security operations center, we recognize that there's also gaps in pure log management as well. And really kind of the triad that we go for detection and response is when we combine log, packet, and endpoint. So our core solution offering, I will say, is focused around the logs and the MDR platform. And if you look kind of the logs in the middle and where that's feeding into as far as our MDR platform, what does our MDR platform mean? The MDR platform is taking data, regardless of whether it's logs or other types of data sets, and it's providing the aggregation and normalization. It's providing the enrichment and analysis, as well as the advanced analytics for our alerting. And then, just as important, it's enabling not only our resources, but also customer resources to be able to investigate, respond, threat hunt, and collaborate between customer and managed security service. So for Verizon MDR, SIEM is included in the Verizon MDR service. And because analytics is the core of this, at least at this point in time, it does require using our analytics components. Now, as far as the other solutions, network packet capture, endpoint, and deception, these are also important pieces to Verizon Managed Detection and Response and pieces that Verizon Managed Detection and Response integrates with, and including Verizon's network detection and response solution and our endpoint partnerships. But because, for example, EDR is a very important piece to managed detection and response and something that our analysts utilize within the solution, but there's quite a bit of EDR solutions out there today. So we did not want to force or require organizations into our EDR solution. So instead, we ingest alerts from all the EDR solutions out there, but have decided to go deeper with some of the major EDR solutions, such as Cylance, Tanium, Carbon Black, and CrowdStrike. And when I say go deeper with these integrations, I'm talking about API integrations that allow our analysts to investigate further into investigations, to pull process information, to perform response and containment actions, essentially acting as if they were on the EDR solution. So while within Verizon MDR, if organizations work with Verizon, while we do have resell capabilities of EDR solutions as well, and so we can still provide the complete package, we will also work and integrate with the organization's EDR solution as well. Now, as far as the information and the platform and what this is providing, again, kind of SIEM and UEBA being kind of the core components with these other technologies as deep integration points to provide additional visibility. The platform also provides us our foothold back into the customer's organization. So it's back on the left in the lower the lower portion of that diagram. You see the Verizon component, which is our remote ingester node. And this is what allows us to collect logs, as well as what allows us to integrate with solutions like Active Directory, single sign-on or identity management systems, vulnerability management systems, asset management systems. This is something that our client security engineer would be very much actively working on to make sure that we're getting as much context for the customer network as possible. And what we do with this information is that we bring this back to our platform in real time, and we use this to fuse it with the rest of the data that we're collecting, so that we can take a user and an entity-based approach when we're investigating and when we're alerting. This is a core component to user and entity behavioral analytics, and from as long as we're talking technologies, from a UEBA perspective, being able to bring in that identity information. So similar to, I mentioned the EDR components and the integrations and the vendors that we're supporting for that. One of the components for Verizon MDR is focusing on the unique components that Verizon can bring and the unique value that Verizon brings to the table. And so what we've done is we have partnered with several technologies to really put together Verizon Managed Detection and Response, where Verizon is really focusing on our unique capabilities, which is our integration, our people, our process, and some of our technology components. But from a SIM and a platform perspective, we have partnered with Securonics to come up with a custom Verizon MDR solution for our customers. So this is what is being provided at the core, and the reason that I share this with everyone is that UEBA and advanced analytics are such an important piece to the Verizon MDR solution, and we're very proud to be partnering with Securonics, who is a clear leader in that space. So this is some of the technology components to Verizon MDR, and between these different data types, we're giving our analysts the complete visibility that they need to be able to both detect threats, investigate, and respond within an environment. So as far as some of the higher level concepts, the vision and the flexibility that we're really focusing on, there's a few kind of core components to MDR that I think are important to highlight. One is that Verizon MDR is a cloud-based solution. All of the technologies that we bring into the MDR solution are cloud-based. Obviously, this allows us to scale. It also allows us to rapidly evolve and deploy new capabilities. From a threat hunting, from a research perspective, and from an analytics perspective, I can't understate the value of being cloud-based. Being able to hunt across our multi-tenant platform, being able to research and perform analytics, being able to tune our content and test our content before it ever gets pushed out, in front of customers, and being able to adapt as quickly as the threat landscape adapts. The comprehensive analytics core. I mentioned UEBA as that core component. When we think about where this solution is going and where the industry is going, we're very much moving away from the commodity. We're focusing on the types of resources that the typical customer really struggles to be able to hire. So we're not focusing on these level 1 analysts anymore. We're focusing on tier 2, on tier 3, on experienced security engineers, on data scientists, and all of this is being applied and put into our analytics. Another component that comes with this is the API integrations and automation. So building in automation is one of the ways that we're able to move away from tier 1 and to more junior analysts. By automating some of the response procedures, by the time our tier 2 and tier 3 analysts pick up an incident, a lot of the data has been collected, and now it's up to the analyst to interpret that. Obviously, that interpretation is a much more difficult task, which is why we have these more experienced analysts. And then as well as making sure that we are able to automate and integrate into the customer environment. While this will continue to evolve over time, we very much want flexibility to be able to work and respond based on the customer's needs, based on the other customer tool sets that they have, and based on their level of risk and what they're willing to adopt from a response perspective. When we do talk about response, oftentimes we're talking about a deeper level of investigation. Oftentimes we're also talking about guided recommendations through remediation. I do want to make sure that we're clear that we're not talking about actively going out and re-imaging the machines. And oftentimes, a lot of organizations are not going to want us to take action on their environment either. So from a response perspective, we're focusing on the integrations that allow our analysts to put together a more comprehensive report. We're focusing on the actions that allow our analysts to contain threats, such as through EDR integrations like a host quarantine or blacklisting a file or a process within individual hosts, but very much taking a cautious approach that we also want to make sure that we have the flexibility for even organizations that don't want us to take that active action, but want us to inform them, instruct them on what they need to be doing. So that's getting into the additional core detection and the flexible response. And then finally, we also need a flexible pricing model, and we need to make this a little bit easier for organizations to adopt. When we talk about vendor overload, we wouldn't be solving much of that problem if we're providing just as complex of a solution but when we're piecing together all these technologies. So the flexible pricing model, what we've provided is both a user-based as well as a volume-based model. Because we're using cloud technologies, our volume-based pricing model, we are able to remove our overage costs and use an average volume per month. If anyone has dealt with SIM before and has dealt with SIM overages, most organizations or most solutions are dealing with either events per second or a gigabytes per day, which means that you're essentially being charged, if not at the top or your peak, throughout the month, you're being charged pretty close to that peak. So this allows us to reduce our costs, but even more importantly, make it easier to plan and predict plan and predict growth and avoid some of those overages. So both our user-based and volume-based pricing models have been designed, again, to make it easier for organizations to consume, and especially with the user-based pricing model, has been done in a way that allows us to collaborate with organizations to make sure that we're getting the data needed to effectively detect and respond, rather than constantly focusing on, are we at our volume limit for the particular solution at this time, and being forced to cut out critical data that's needed for the service. So just to provide a little bit of an example, of what this looks like, I mentioned our partnership with Securonics and the Verizon Managed Detection Response dashboard is in front of you. As you see, a few things that I've mentioned. In the top left there, we've got the top violators next to the top threats and the top violations. The top violators allows us to really analyze risk across users and devices, and through the analytics in this platform, allows us to focus on risk to the organization over time, rather than what has traditionally and historically been very much IP-based point-in-time detections. We're able to put a very, very complex picture together of what a user means. Even if they have multiple accounts and multiple usernames within an environment, for example, myself, I could have Scott.Carter, I could have Scott Carter 1, I could have S. Carter, I could have multiple accounts within an organization. Between our technology and the people and process that make sure that we collect this information, we're able to track that back and link that back to a single user or in a single account, so that if you as a customer come in, or for our analytics or our analysts, if we want to know everything that Scott Carter did, we have the ability to search across that single entity, and we've linked all of these accounts to that. In addition to that, we also have flexibility as far as our analysis goes, in that we've got we are mapping to both kill chain as well as MITRE ATT&CK framework, as well as using Veris on the back end, obviously feeding into the Verizon data breach report and making sure that statistics can continue to feed into that. As far as access to the solution, while this is a multi-tenant cloud platform, obviously not complete access won't be given, but we wanted very much to avoid a black box approach to managed services. We didn't want customers to be forced to purchase their own technologies in addition to Verizon MDR, if they want to evolve their own security, but maybe aren't at a point of owning it completely yet. So we provide full access to any of the data that gets ingested into the system. We provide visibility into the violations, into the threats, and we also provide visibility into the dashboarding and our search capabilities, which includes millisecond response times for up to 30 days, and warm storage, which is the same interface for 90 days of retention and use either by our analysts or by the customer. So again, going back to, we very much wanted to create a solution that allows for collaboration, allows for a customer security organization to expand, contract based on their current budget or resource needs, but still providing them access to the solutions rather than a complete black box. So regarding the focus of this solution as far as the market goes, and whether this solution is right for you or not. And really, there's no definitive customer base and clear definition of what organizations are properly suited for managed detection and response, other than what I can provide here, which is small organizations with little or no existing investment in threat detection, forensics and response, advanced analytics. There's obviously a very obvious fit there. But also larger organizations. We have a lot of larger organizations within our managed security services, and a lot of organizations that within managed detection and response, that really it's more about what sort of flexibility do you want, and what sort of ownership do you want. If you're willing to adopt and accept Verizon's best practices, and you're looking to Verizon, as the subject matter experts for these solutions, then Verizon Managed Detection and Response, I think, is a very well-suited solution for these types of organizations. And it's going back to ensuring that these larger organizations still have access to a lot of the capabilities within these technologies, and certainly access to all of the information, not just the alerts that get spit out. So we're seeing very much a mix of both small and large organizations. And then obviously the flexibility within our standard MDR analyst capabilities and response capabilities, which involve utilizing the MDR platform and the integrations specifically through our MDR platform. Our response procedures, our integrations, are going to be, and what our analysts utilize are going to be through that MDR platform. But with Verizon and with our enhanced services, we're also able to provide a deeper level of service and customization when we move from our shared MDR resource model into a dedicated resource model, which actually allows more custom response procedures. It allows our analysts to actually work within security, within the customer's security tool sets, customer ticketing systems, and potentially even put an on-site resource as well. So we really have a wide range of what's available when partnering with Verizon for detection and response services. So wanting to make sure that we leave some time for questions and answers, I'll do a little bit of a review here. But essentially, Verizon Managed Detection and Response, at the core, it's a combination of people and process technology. We are making sure that we are bringing the industry-leading technologies into this solution, but that organizations don't have to worry about the underlying technologies, the underlying products. We can be having that conversation about value and about what's needed to adequately protect your organization and your environment. We've built the people and the process in to really form a partnership and a continuous program, whether it be the monthly threat hunting, the client security engineers with dedicated hours, the MDR analysts, which are Tier 2 and Tier 3 analysts that would be working with the customer and providing recommendations on what needs to happen next, rather than just tossing incidents, kind of over the fence to customers. Really a sense of ownership and collaboration in this solution. And then from a technology perspective, the core technology being the SIM and the UEBA with those deep integrations, especially into endpoint detection and response solutions, which really, when we do have an EDR agent on the device in question, really allows our analysts to go that much further and provide that much more confidence behind our recommendations, but also into the other types of detect and respond technologies, which give us an even more well-rounded solution. And in the future, you'll see within Verizon Managed Detection and Response more and more combination and packaging behind those as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, and hopefully this was a decent introduction. Obviously, we could talk for days on when we get into detection and response discussions, but very much appreciate all the time that you guys have, that everyone has provided for us today. And I want to pause and pass it over to McLean to make sure that we are answering any questions that are coming out of the audience.
Scott, thank you so much for that great overview. I agree this is a perfect place to stop and pause and open up the floor for questions and continue the conversation. So folks in the audience, please start typing in your questions. If we do not get to every question, we will follow up with you via email after this event. So while we give people a moment to queue up questions, I'd just like to remind everybody that there are more webinars taking place this afternoon and all day tomorrow, so please join us for more of these sessions. We'd love to have you. All right, questions are starting to come in. First one, if you're ready, Scott, the first one. What regions do you support for MDR?
So Verizon MDR, as I mentioned, we are cloud-based, but we understand that there are still going to be data sovereignty requirements and things like that. So while initially it is a global offering, we have set up our architectures in a way that we have both a US and a German region to begin with, meaning that all data is captured and processed within that region. Our initial phase still involves analysts from around the world, but the architecture has been set up in a way that we still have the data stored and retained within that specific region. And then also for as far as future and where we, building the architecture in this way, we've done this with the intent of providing regional specific analyst capabilities as well going forward. So our initial pods are US and Germany, with APAC planned for later this year, APAC being serviced out of the US region for now. And that is those are our starting points, but being cloud-based, obviously plan to evolve and continue to expand those capabilities as privacy and regulations evolve, and we have to adapt to those.
Great, that's great, Scott. Another question just came in. Sorry, I lost my screen for a moment. Does Verizon MDR use automation via SOAR?
So the Verizon MDR solution does have SOAR capabilities built into the solution, but I will also add the caveat that the SOAR capabilities are essentially used and intended for our internal purposes and for our connection to the customer purposes. So it is not meant to be a displacement or replacement for what a customer, if a customer was to purchase their own SOAR solution. But we do use these SOAR components to automate a lot of the triage process. We use these SOAR components to reach out and for our integrations into the customer environment. So one example might be, our playbooks, and as our analysts are performing their actions, they might need to pull process information for a particular event. For example, let's say that there is a beaconing event, and we want to know what process was spawning a network connection from the endpoint. So one of the ways that we would use SOAR is allowing our analysts to ask for this process information, and then depending on the customer, within our SOAR solution, our client security engineer would have configured, well, this customer has silence optics. And so when our analyst asks this question, it knows to reach out to silence optics to get the answer for this particular customer. Or this other customer has CrowdStrike, and so it knows to ask the appropriate place. So it's very much used for our purposes, to really allow our analysts to go much deeper into the investigations and into the containment and response pieces. But it is not open for complete customer utilization. Great.
We do have a next question that I'll actually take since it's a quickie. When is the next session and what is it on today's schedule? And that is at 3 p.m. Eastern, and it's proactive incident response for when the snow hits the fan. Now, next question. Are there specific industries adopting MDR?
So similar to organization size, we're really seeing adoption and interest from all over the place. I'd say there are definitely some industries where we're seeing, I guess, gaps, a bit more gaps, and a lot of the times that's going to come in the highly regulated, financial, I think is one in particular, and going back to the types of organizations that might be interested in Verizon MDR. If an organization has a very large security operations center with a lot of custom process and advanced capabilities in place, that probably is not going to be as likely as a fit for Verizon MDR, and so it's more in line with the types of industries that typically have those types of capabilities. Financial, I think, being a good example there. But outside of that, I don't even want to say maturity, but it's more along the lines of budget, resources, and the amount of time that they've been able to spend, customizing into their environment. Outside of that, we're really seeing a lot of interest, kind of across the board, industry-wise.
Great. The next question is, you said MDR pricing is based on user or volume. How small do you start?
So for our user-based pricing model, we do start as low as 100 users. And from a volume perspective, obviously volume being around the data ingested into the core platform, so primarily the SIM capability, it would be at 10 gigabytes per day. And then obviously for our integrations, since those are primarily used for investigation and response, those would not be associated with that pricing. So it's essentially based on that user or volume, starting at 100 user organizations and 10 gigabytes per day.
Great. Okay. Another question. What types of log sources do you focus on?
So the types of log sources, it's going to vary depending on the organization. Obviously, there are some, there are going to be core types of log sources that, device categories that we're going to say, these are essential. But as far as kind of going further, and then as far as going further into, what we would collect for a particular environment, that's very much an evolution, and another reason for that client security engineer. We could say that an organization has, 2,000 Windows servers, and we could blanket and say we need all Windows servers. But if 1,000 of those are, on a guest Wi-Fi network, and 1,000 of those are on, your PCI within your PCI environment, the value and the criticality is going to be very different. So while we do kind of scope and have some initial categories, it's very much focused on what is needed to effectively detect and then effectively investigate and respond within this particular organization. So going back to that partnership and collaboration, we've focused significantly on that to make sure that not only can we get an understanding up front, but that we continue to learn and continue to grow with the customer in understanding how to get the best visibility.
That's great. Thanks, Scott. A few more questions are still coming in. Next one is, how would you approach a company that hasn't heard of MDR before? How would you position this?
How would we approach an organization that hasn't heard of MDR? I guess one of the reasons that I kind of like this solution is that, with any organization, we're able to step back and talk about security. We're able to talk about what's important to your organization. What are you trying to protect? And within the MDR umbrella, we have the flexibility to craft the solution that is going to protect and provide the customer what they need for visibility and detection. So I guess that's why I really like this solution, is that, you know, approaching an organization that hasn't heard of MDR, it's really going to be approaching that organization to talk about security, to talk about, you know, how do we provide better visibility, better metrics, and not only, you know, as we're doing detection and response, but also, you know, how, as a security team, how do you communicate this internally within your organization? How do you show the value of your security organization? And so within MDR, we're very cognizant of that, very cognizant that we want to continue to show value. Whether, you know, a threat hunting program, I think, is a good example. Whether we find anything or not, we are going to be having our monthly review with the customer, that monthly meeting specifically around our threat hunting, to review what our strategy was for that month, whether we found anything or not, and other insights essentially that we gathered from that threat hunting. With our client security engineers, those dedicated hours, that includes recurring meetings, either weekly or bi-weekly, to talk about the latest incidents that have been passed over to the customer, whether they have any questions on them, whether the remediation or the reimage or anything like that was successful, and so that we can close those out, but also so that on our monthly basis we can review with customers. We can review, you know, the types of alerts we're getting, whether we're getting them from particular types of particular areas of the network. Let's say that, you know, it's your HR group for some reason is generating all sorts of anomalies in this area. You know, how do we modify the system to improve it going forward? Or what sort of controls could you put in place to help with this going forward? So the fact that we are really putting the people and process in place here to implement security as a program, you know, I think allows us to talk to organizations that have never heard of MDR and talk to them about security.
Great. Well, we are getting close on time, so I'm just going to ask a couple more that have come in. How is managed detection and response different from the other security solutions Verizon offers?
So that's a little bit of a tricky one, because Verizon offers, you know, a very long list of security solutions and security services. But I will say one of the biggest shifts is making sure, you know, is that shift towards resources that are very difficult for organizations to hire, making sure that we're focused on the more advanced users, the more experienced users, the focus on data science and advanced analytics, and the architecture and integration of these solutions in a way that is really designed for us to be able to adapt to the latest threat landscape, because it is constantly changing. So if there's anything I could say about Verizon MDR, is that it's designed in a way to constantly evolve, whether it be adapting to customer environment changes, adapting to the threat landscape, adapting to new technologies. It's very much the technologies that go into this, you'll see, is kind of involved in that program as much as the people and process. Great.
Well, we have a lot of questions that have come in, so it might be best for us to end here and follow up with those who have asked questions that we didn't address via email following this session. And I'd like to thank Scott. Thank you very much for this great discussion. And thanks to everybody who participated and sent us your questions and listened to this presentation. And again, Security Summit Series continues this afternoon and all of tomorrow. Thanks so much.